everyone, Ashley Arens here, Client Services Director with the Rocky Mountain Victim Law Center. I'm here for the first of 5 videos discussing the Victims' Rights Act here in Colorado. Today's conversation will focus on our history, and then subsequent videos are going to talk about the rights that are afforded to survivors here in Colorado as they navigate the criminal justice system. I wanted to start off by talking about the convergence of events that happened in the 70s and 80s that led to what was going to eventually be Colorado's VRA, or Victims' Rights Act. In the late 70s, and mid-70s, we saw a number of activists, larger social push to come together to have a conversation about giving victims a seat at the table, about what it meant like to be an advocate. And this converged at the same time as the attempted assassination on President Reagan. As President Reagan walked through the criminal justice process like any other victim, he recognized his voice wasn't being heard, that there wasn't opportunities for him to be notified or informed of what was happening, and this was an injustice to somebody who arguably has such significant power in the United States. I think this really rang true with, again, some of the larger conversations happening from activists across the country saying that the way that the criminal justice system was handling cases, handling crimes, not only in prosecution but in our treatment of victims, was absolutely incongruent with the hope that someone would be treated with, for example, fairness, dignity, and respect. From the attempted assassination and that experience that President Reagan had, he formed in 1982 a congressional task force to really investigate, a presidential task force to go and investigate the experience that other survivors had during the criminal justice process. There was numerous interviews throughout the country, including of service providers, law enforcement, DA's offices, and victims themselves. From this, we got a larger picture as a country that the treatment of victims and survivors was disgraceful, in the words of that report, that victims were sort of the forgotten people in the criminal justice process, despite that process being about something they experienced and endured. From there, we saw the creation of things like the Office for Victims of Crime. We saw funds become available to service providers, organizations, law enforcement, DA's offices, etc., through the Victims of Crime Act. And then furthermore, in the early 90s, the conversation came to Colorado. In 1992, we had, with over 80% of the vote, a constitutional amendment changed Colorado's constitution to afford rights to victims. And then in 1992 and 3, enabling legislation passed to really solidify what that would look like for citizens in Colorado. What would it look like for somebody to go through that process and experience a crime here and be afforded rights, and what would those look like in practice? And so that's sort of the beginning parts of the historical perspective of the VRA. We've had the VRA in Colorado for over 25 years now, which is an exciting place for our state. And so I look forward in the next few videos talking to you a little bit about those rights and what that looks like in practice. Thanks so much.